Hi, I'm talking mostly to the Brugman tribe, and I'm doing this little project for my son Jeff. He asked me to answer some questions that you guys have had over a period of time that I know I can answer, and I hope it's here for your enlightenment and enjoyment. I must explain that Tom Brugman, your father, some of you your grandfather, was one of my best lifetime friends. He was a gentleman. He was a sailor. He knew his seamanship, and he was an excellent representative of the U.S. Navy. And as I said, one of my very best friends ever. And for a period of probably 20 years, the two families hung out together. But there was a period of time, maybe 2 or 2.5 years, that Tom and I served on the same ship, the USS Compton. It was a fine ship and wonderful officers in the wardroom and a great captain or two that we had. And Tom and I traveled a great deal while we were on that ship, up and down the East Coast to Cuba, across the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. We participated in some real life experiences over there of creating situations where a Russian submarine had to surface because of us, which was our goal, was to surface it. And just travels and Liberty ports in general were just a lifelong treasure for he and I. We remembered it all very, very often and fondly. As we know, Tom became a patient of MS. And believe me, when it first started, none of us knew anything about it. I mean, the general public wasn't really even aware of what your father's illness was. And right up until the time he retired from the Navy, he did his job quite well, overcoming the difficulties of MS. But you guys have given me some questions that you'd like answered about your father, or it could be your grandfather, and even your great-grandfather, Frank Brugman. And here we go. From Jomi, she asked me, and I'm referred to a lot as Uncle Bob, who sent postcards and photos of his family for 16 long years to his buddy in the vet's home. And the answer is me. But it's important you understand why I did it. Not only was he my friend, but all the people that always would go to visit him were my friends too. And I was fully aware of how hard it is to have ongoing conversations when somebody's in the hospital for that length of time. So all those cards, letters, photographs and all were just designed mostly, besides saying hi to Tom, to generate questions and conversation with the people visiting. And I know it worked because I was told that. And it's something you can do with other friends that might become incapacitated. The photographs were all the ones that are rejected out of a roll of film. Well, I know you don't do it that way today, but we used to have lots of rejects from a roll of film. And I didn't waste them. I'd send them to Tom. Also, just very short notes, postcards where the front would trigger a conversation. And he told me, and I know it, and his family told me they appreciated that all those years. And I was really happy to be doing it. Joey, I hope that answers your question about those postcards. Lisa asked a question. What was Dad like in a leadership position and how the guys looked up to him. Well, he was, in fact, a great leader. When I worked with him, he was a division officer on a destroyer. His department was made up of all the engineering rates, and they worshipped him. One time, your father and I were out on Liberty in Montreal, and we were at the Officers Club, the Canadian Navy's Officers Club, and we were drinking. No, that's not true. We were at a civilian nightclub, and we were drinking, and Tom always just enjoyed a glass of beer, and I always drank either a Manhattan or a martini, which is basically 3 ounces of liquor in each glass. And you have to be careful with them. They're really powerful drinks. And that night he asked me at the bar, "What are you drinking?" And I told him I was drinking a drink then it's still called a Rob Roy. "Oh," he said, let me taste it." And so he drank my drink right down. He said, "Those are good." I said, "Yeah, but go easy on them," which he did not do. And he got really arrogant, and he had a mannerism that alerted everybody that knew him. We wore a double-breasted blue coat for our dress uniform. And when he'd unbuttoned his double-breasted suit, we knew somebody was in for trouble. So he walked across the nightclub and created an incident, and all of a sudden he had bouncers on him from the nightclub. And in fact, in those days, the bouncers had a flashlight, but it was a 5-cell D battery flashlight, which makes it really a club. And when they asked him to behave himself, he wouldn't, and then they behaved him. And in doing so, they broke his arm and dislocated his shoulder. Well, and then took us out the front door. Well, Montreal, as you may or may not know, speaks, a great deal of the community speaks French. And I got your father to a French hospital where we couldn't communicate because we didn't know French, and they at least indicated they didn't know English, which was always a question mark. Before we knew it, on the way, getting a cab to go there, his division showed up outside the nightclub and saw that he was hurt. And they surrounded him, like cheering him on, like the victory lap. And they went with us to this hospital where they insisted on going up to the room where he was being treated, etc., etc. And it was a hard time getting these young men to leave his side. But anyhow, that was an incident where his men just absolutely worshipped him. And there were other times, based on the performance of his division, his division had to worship him because they did everything they were ever asked to do, and they had just a perfect record on that particular Mediterranean cruise. They did look up to him, Lisa, and he was a good seaman and sailor. Ellen, your question is, did you really tie a string from your toe to your dad's toe so he couldn't sneak out and take the boat to Fall River? And the answer is yes. We had been, of all places, to Frank Hansen's new restaurant opening. And your father and I had an open bar, which began to mean trouble. So anyhow, Barbara and Peggy were off to a trip. I forget where they went, but Tom and I were home alone on K Street, and he started telling me he was going to take his boat to Fall River. Now that's quite a ride, particularly in a 12-foot old wooden boat. I mean, the boat was over the hill. And I kept, the more I said, no, you're not, of course, the more he said, I'm going to do it, and I can do it, and I will do it. So I thought it would be prudent if he and I that night slept on the hide-a-bed in your living room on K Street. And he still was talking about going to Fall River. So when we laid down on the bed to go to bed, I tied my big toe to his big toe. So if he would try anything tricky with me, he'd alert me to the fact that he was getting ready to leave. And the end of that story, the nicest ending to it is, he did get out, and he did go to Fall River, all the way in that little boat, got home safely, and it was another story for our memory bank. Ellen, he was a great dad, and I know all you girls and guys love him. Maureen asks, what's your favorite memory of my father? I can't wait for the answer. I would also love to know about those boxing matches were like. I'm pretty sure your dad saw him box, meaning Jeffrey's dad saw him box. Let me answer the second one first. To my knowledge, his boxing days were in Vietnam. They weren't on any of the travels I was with him on. And his idea of boxing would be a fancy way of saying a fight. Now, it wouldn't take much to get his Irish up, and but I didn't experience any of that in the way of boxing. But I did see some photographs sometime over him being involved in the sports program there in Vietnam. That's what you might have there on your mind.